Hey guys, I'm Phoenix Gray and welcome to LitRPG Happy Hour, where I sample LitRPG and alcoholic beverages. Feel free to drink along if you dare. Today I'll be reading a sample of Couch Potato Chaos, Gamebound by Erik, and I'll be playing a game called Enemy Mind along with it, where I will take a drink every time, every time the main character takes damage. If you want to follow along, pause this video and download a copy of the book sample at the link below, or you can just take a drink whenever I do. As a disclaimer, I do not read every book that I drink to. This is all for fun and to help spread the word about LitRPG and these awesome books. Having said that, let's get started. Today I'm actually going to be taking shots of Jose Cuervo along with this one, and Erik was nice enough to send me a paperback copy of his book, which is super cool, and he signed it for me, which was super sweet. I don't know if you can really see that, but so I will actually probably be reading all the way through this book. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on the sample. Well, let's get started on pouring me a drink, and then we'll get started on the sample, because I always like to pre-pour so that I don't have to worry about it. There it is. And I have an orange juice chaser with this, because it's really hard for me to take Cuervo straight. I can take other tequilas, but that's kind of not one of them. Anyway, let's get started. Chapter 1, Catalyst. Consider the couch potato. Sedentary creatures, they spend their days transfixed by the warm, iridescent glow of their screens for hours at a time, passively consuming entertainment while producing little of value or merit. They avoid most forms of physical exertion while subsisting primarily on a diet of cupcakes, microwave lasagna, and caffeine. Tasha was the embodiment of the couch potato archetype. She had spent the better part of her childhood sitting on the floor in front of her TV, either enjoying the campy serialized science fiction of the day or watching her father play poorly translated Japanese role-playing games on their 16-bit gaming console. Back then, she would sometimes read the characters' dialogue aloud, using funny voices while watching him play. Those were some of the best years of her life. By the time her father died, she'd inherited his taste in both video games and cringeworthy television. It was her love of gaming which led her to pursue a career in the video game industry. Her studies led her to be a decent enough programmer, but after college she quickly learned that landing her first job in the industry was easier said than done. Most game companies ignored her resume entirely, and those few who did respond turned her away, suggesting that she get more industry experience before bothering them with an application. When she was finally called in for an interview, she was over the moon. They had asked her some simple questions in vector math and programming, as well as some math-based logic puzzles that would have felt out of place in a Professor Layton game. When they offered her a job with an insultingly low annual salary, she had thought herself lucky. It was way below the industry average, but not entirely unreasonable for someone just starting out. For the first few years, the job meant something to her. The company put actual effort into making their games entertaining. Times had been better then. The first game they developed was a mid-core action platformer. Sure, it was a tad derivative, but the game had character, and she enjoyed working on it. She was used to working long hours of unpaid overtime, but at the beginning she didn't mind as much. It was a labor of love, and the office was filled with laughter and the occasional impromptu Nerf gunfight. But things had changed since then. The job no longer had a sense of purpose, and the camaraderie was no longer there. In an attempt to increase short-term profit, the company had switched to flooding the market with minimal effort, pay-to-win mobile games. Most of their projects were just reskins of the same game with small cosmetic changes. Most of her colleagues had the presence of mind to move on to other companies, but not her. Tasha hated change. She sometimes daydreamed about quitting, but it never went farther than that. One fateful Friday evening, Tasha was riding home on the metro after a day of especially pointless and mind-numbing work. The company was always crunching these days. The hours had grown longer and the weekends had grown shorter. As the bus came to a stop, she made her way to the front and stepped onto the sidewalk. The driver closed the door behind her without a word, and the bus pulled away. She was about to start walking toward her apartment complex when her smartphone began to vibrate in the pocket of her jeans. She took it out and glanced at it. It was her boss. What is this horrible little man calling me now? Why is that horrible little man calling me now? This was supposed to be my weekend off. She let the call go to voicemail, thinking if she ignored him, he'd leave her alone. She'd worked weekends for 3 weeks without rest. Enough was enough. The sky was already growing darker as the sun made its daily descent into the western horizon. A single drop of rainwater touched her cheek, followed by another. Thick storm clouds had gathered in the distance and were approaching rapidly. She picked up her pace, planting one foot after another in rapid succession. She'd need to move quickly to reach her apartment before the storm hit. She neared a familiar fork in the road, which split off to the left and right. Having walked this path on a daily basis, she knew that both paths would converge at her apartment. To the left were rows of shops and restaurants, including a pizza place that she rather enjoyed, and the right touched upon a residential area filled with houses and apartment complexes. Experience had taught her that neither path would get her home more swiftly than the other. Today, however, she saw something out of the ordinary, a dimly glowing blue rectangle hovering in the air. She approached it slowly, tilting her head in curiosity. The box floated unsupported. It just sort of hung there in stubborn defiance of the laws of gravity. It was a bit like a partially visible TV screen, but it didn't appear to be connected to anything. Naturally, Tasha did the first thing that any halfway reasonable human being does when confronted with the unknown. She poked at it with a stick. There was a nice pointy one on the ground beside her, so she picked it up and jabbed at the screen a few times. The small twig made contact with the rectangle, but continued through it without resistance as though the screen wasn't there. She extended her arm and found that it went straight through the ghostly projection. It was like one of those holograms from any number of science fiction shows, or maybe a UI element from a video game. Circling around the strange apparition, she found that it looked nearly the same from the back. Observing it from the back revealed that the text was inverted, as if being seen through a mirror. She regarded two lines of text written on the screen. The first line was an arrow pointing to the left, accompanied by the word adventure. Below that was an arrow pointing to the right with the word safety. Tasha took a step away from the glowing blue box. The arrows were pointing in the two directions that the road branched into. There was nothing notable down either path, save for the rapidly increasing rainfall. It was like a signpost, one way for adventure and the other for safety. What a convenient game-like mechanic, she thought. If this were a game, taking the path to the left would trigger some sort of scripted event. As a professional game developer, she was used to thinking about things in terms of video games, but there was a world of difference between video games and reality. On reflection, she didn't consider herself an adventuresome lady. She would often dream about going on adventures, but those were just fantasies. Real-life adventures were scary, involved the risk of bodily harm, and made one late for work the following day. For several long minutes, she just stared at the glowing screen as it floated unmoving in the air. One way for adventure and the other for safety. Perhaps this was the universe's idea of a practical joke, or, more likely, this was nothing more than a stress-induced hallucination. After a moment of contemplation, she mentally chided herself and took the path to the right, the direction indicated by the word safety. The rain was picking up, and she didn't have time to indulge in this sort of meaningless nonsense, not if she wanted to avoid the bulk of the storm and remain marginally dry. As she stepped up the pace, lightning arced across the horizon before her. The flash momentarily highlighted the shape of the oncoming storm clouds, followed by a report of thunder. As she passed rows of houses on the street to her left, several of their outdoor lights switched on, providing modest illumination to the darkening street. The storm was very nearly upon her. Her right foot splashed into a newly formed puddle as she walked. She had tarried for too long at the crossroads, and the trickle of rain had turned into a downpour. Some of the water from the puddle entered her shoes and filled her socks so that every time she took a step, they made a sloshing sound. She continued for nearly 5 minutes before she reached the door to her apartment complex. It was a large 12-story brick building lined with balconies. This apartment building featured a security box at the front entrance to deter the uninvited. Upon typing in the 4-digit code, she heard a click indicating that the door was unlocked and that she could enter. She reached out her hand to turn the handle and open the door, but didn't actually touch it. Some inner doubt caused her to hesitate, and her hand remained suspended in the air right before the handle. It was as though there was a finality to the act of opening the door. Why hadn't she chosen safety over adventure? Hesitating, she continued her earlier actions. Surely the floating screen thing was just a figment of her imagination brought on by stress. But even if that were the case, she still could have indulged the fantasy and chosen adventure. She had made a deliberate choice, and it was one that she had repeated many times throughout her life. Her refusal to leave her job was only the most recent example of this. She hated her job and remained only because she was used to being there, and it supported her couch potato lifestyle. She lived her entire life in the path of least resistance. Her hand stubbornly refused to touch the door handle, and she remained there, transfixed. She couldn't bring herself to do it. Why hadn't she chosen adventure? A low click sounded. The electronic lock had grown bored of waiting for her to get on and do something, and had relocked itself. If she wanted to enter the building, she would need to re-enter the code to assure the lock that she really did want in. As she turned around, she looked back the way she had come. She stood sheltered under the apartment building's entrance as a curtain of rainwater rushed inches from her. The rainfall had grown into a mighty torrent. "This is stupid," she said aloud. "Just open the damn door." Instead, she turned away from the potential warmth of her home and ran back into the storm. Seconds after she passed through the curtain of water, she was soaked from head to toe. The cold wetness of her clothes pressed against her, and her denim jacket became heavier in the deluge. Water dripped from her hair and into her eyes, forcing her to blink away the rainwater. She took off running down the street beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. Minutes later, she reached the place where the two roads diverged. The glowing screen was a beacon in the storm. It was still there. She could make out its shape and dim glow between the lines of rainfall. She picked up the pace, but this time she took the road to the left, following the path marked Adventure. A flood of cold rainwater enveloped her body, sending fresh shivers through her body. The rain-filled night was illuminated by a brilliant flash of light. At the same time, there was a thunderclap as a lightning bolt struck a nearby deciduous tree. A tree branch struck her as it fell, knocking her to the asphalt and earning her scratches to the face and knee. Fear and pain overtook her for a moment. As she got back to her feet, she found that the large tree had fallen into the road, blocking her path. There didn't seem to be a way around it, so she pulled out her smartphone and turned on the flashlight app to light her way. The only way around it was through a large pool of water, so she found the best point to climb over the tree. Although she was out of shape and shunned any form of physical exertion that didn't involve remote control, she nevertheless climbed over the tree and stood on the other side. She returned her phone to the pocket of her jeans. Pellets of water beat against her as she made her way along the path. It was as though the wind was alive and trying to force her back the way she had come. Gritting her teeth, she pushed against it, her feet sloshing the rainwater one step at a time. Finally, her apartment building was once again in sight, and what a sight it was! Lightning struck the top of the apartment building once, only to strike the same location a moment later. Seconds passed, and a third bolt struck the same place. Each time she heard and felt the thunderous sound of the impact. Although she was understandably hesitant to approach the building after such a phenomenon, she did so. Fighting against the wind, she forced her way step by step to the door. Finally, she was standing under the safety and relative dryness of the apartment's awning once again. Exhausted, she collapsed onto the ground, leaning against the brick wall. After a moment, she got to her feet and entered the code into the security box. This time she didn't hesitate and grabbed the handle, opening the door. Stepping inside, she let the door shut behind her. She stood upon the base of the stairwell as water dripped from her hair and clothing, forming a small puddle on the thinly carpeted floor. Her jeans were torn at the knee where she had hit the pavement. She was wet, frozen, and bleeding from the knee and elbow as she began her ascent. Each step sent a small shudder of pain to her leg. When she finally reached the third floor, she unlocked the apartment door and stepped inside. She closed the door behind her and fastened the door guard. She desperately wanted to take a hot bath. At first it appeared that nothing had changed. Her home was a small budget single-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but she didn't need much space. With her work schedule, she barely spent any time at home anyway. There was a small kitchenette that doubled as a dining room and tripled as the foyer. It opened up into a modest living room. The living room had a balcony, but Tasha rarely used it, not being the outdoorsy type. A raggedy old couch took up the bulk of the living room, while a 10-year-old plasma TV occupied a small table in the corner. Her exercise bicycle sat in the far, unused side of the living room. Lately it had been accumulating cobwebs. She'd been meaning to give it a good dusting and clean off the cobwebs, but she could never seem to find the time. There was a narrow hallway which led to her bedroom and a utilitarian bathroom. She proceeded past the bathroom and entered the bedroom. The bedroom sported a twin bed and her desk, which she kept her computer, a pink anime cat-themed Windows 98 netbook, where she kept her computer. Her infrequent visitors and even more infrequent boyfriends would try to get her to upgrade to a more modern PC, and maybe one just a bit less pink, but she'd resisted the temptations thus far. She would prefer to spend the money on video games rather than an updated laptop, but that was only a small part of the reason. The netbook had been a gift from her father, and it had become a keepsake, something to remember him by. Her father had died nearly 10 years ago, and the netbook was one of the last things that he gave her. She was about to get undressed in preparation for a bath when she noticed a light emanating from the pocket of her jeans. She pulled out her smartphone. She had neglected to turn off the flashlight app from earlier. As she was about to switch it off, she spied something amiss. On the cell phone face, where it normally showed the current time of day, the numbers 99:53:05 appeared. Now it read 99:53:04, 99:53:03. For some reason beyond her understanding, her cell phone's clock had been replaced by a countdown. She shut down her phone's flashlight app and set it face up on the computer desk. She looked up at the round analog clock that hung on her bedroom wall. It had also undergone a change. Where there used to be 12 numbers, there were now 10, ranging from 0 to 90 in increments of 10. The hour and minute hand were pointed up, and the second hand was ticking down in a counterclockwise rotation. Her netbook indicated that the current time was 99:52. She took a moment and considered her options. In the last half hour, she had witnessed floating translucent dialogue boxes, had a transformative moment of self-discovery, been nearly killed by 2 lightning bolts in a falling tree, and now all of the clocks in her apartment seemed to be ticking backwards. Upon further analysis, Panic seemed to be the most reasonable option available to her. The clock's second hand continued its counterclockwise journey. When it reached the 00 number at the top, the minute hand ticked backward ever so slightly. It had to be some sort of countdown, but a countdown to what? Was she expected to do something before it reached 0? If that were the case, there were just under 100 hours left. She couldn't write this off as a trick of delusion. Whatever was happening now had a consequence of her decision at the crossroads. She had chosen to go on an adventure, and now it seemed that one had found her. Chapter 2. The Inverted Clock. Tasha spent several minutes transfixed, staring at her wall clock in wonderment and confusion. Its second hand continued to tick backward along its slow counterclockwise rotation. She was roused from her stupor by a sharp buzzing sound. It took her a moment to realize that the sound was from the door buzzer. Someone was outside the building and wanted to be let in. She made her way back to the entrance and touched the button on the speaker linked to the box outside the building. Hello? The box replied in a staticky male voice. Delivery service, I have a package for Tasha Singleton. She hesitated. Who would be making the delivery at this hour, and through the storm? She pressed the button on the box, allowing the man entry to the building. After a few minutes, there was a knock at the door. Keeping the security chain fastened, she opened the door a few inches. It was indeed a delivery guy carrying a brown cardboard box. The man smiled at her. She closed the door, undid the lock, and opened it the rest of the way. Tasha Singleton? The man asked. I've got this package for you. Could you sign for it? The first thing she noticed about the man was that he was completely dry. If he had been out in the storm, his clothes ought to have been dripping wet. Yeah, sure thing. So I guess the rain has stopped. The man looked at her quizzically and said, I don't know what you mean. It hasn't rained a bit all week. You must be mistaken. She scribbled her signature on the man's tablet and received the small brown parcel. While doing so, she snuck a surreptitious glance at his digital watch. It read 99:48. Hey, can you tell me what time it is? The man glanced at his watch and said, It's 7:23. Good evening, miss. With that, he turned away and left. After closing the door and securing the lock, she placed the package upon the kitchen counter. It was a plain brown cardboard box. Turning it around in her hand, she found the label and saw who it was addressed by. The sender was her father, Jack Singleton, who had died 10 years prior. She considered the box for several moments in bewilderment before noticing that the label indicated it had been sent 17 years ago, 7 years before his death. This package was a time-delayed delivery. That shouldn't be possible. She had only moved into her apartment a few years ago, so logically her dad wouldn't have known where to send it. Somehow her father had pulled a Back to the Future too, and sent her a package almost 2 decades before he could have known where she would be living. Well, the mystery wouldn't solve itself. There was nothing for it but to open the package and see what was inside. She dug around in her utility drawer for some kind of cutting instrument. There were scissors somewhere, but she couldn't find them, like usual. Finally, in desperation, she pulled out her apartment key and used the sharp pointy edge to cut through the tape. Having opened the box, she found one of those metallic static-proof bags. Setting the box aside, she carefully removed a single object from the bag. It was a Super Nintendo video game cartridge. The label on the cartridge featured a crossed sword and staff against a black background. The words, Legend of Ethereal, appeared below them in bold red lettering. Both she and her father had been avid video gamers. It had been one of the few things that they had in common while growing up. After his death, she had inherited his rather sizable collection of video games, but she'd never heard of this one. Why had her father sent this to her? She decided to postpone the luxury of panic until after she took a shower. She was still cold and dripping wet. She set the game on the counter and headed to the bathroom. Chapter 3. The Gamebound Traveler. Her body was wet and chilled to the bone. What she really wanted was to take a long, soaky bubble bath with her favorite rubber duck, Mr. Quackers. Regrettably, she felt that she couldn't afford to take any more time than necessary. Nothing inspired haste more than an impossible and mysterious countdown. After the all-too-brief shower, she bandaged up the cuts on her knee and face. They had already stopped bleeding on their own, but it wouldn't do to let them get infected. Her favorite PJs were sitting on top of the laundry pile in the hamper. They weren't technically clean, but in her personal estimation, they still qualified as clean adjacent. She threw them on and donned her comfy red bathrobe. The bathrobe was old and worn out, but she still liked it. It was warm, and she would occasionally use it as a makeshift blanket while vegging out on the couch. The finishing touch to her ensemble was her trusty bunny slippers. She slipped her feet into them and returned to the living room. She was distracted by a low buzzing sound coming from the kitchen. Her cell phone was vibrating in place on the counter. The front surface of the phone indicated another incoming call from her boss. She reluctantly hit the answer button. The voice that came over the speaker was harsh and abrasive, not unlike the caller himself. It was her boss, Hubert Stensley. Tasha, why didn't you answer the phone earlier? because I was trying to avoid having to talk to you. Hey, boss, I was taking a shower. What do you need? Next time, bring your phone with you into the bathroom. I don't like having my time wasted. Listen, Tasha, we lost some people, so I'm going to need you to work this weekend to take up the slack. What do you mean you've lost some people? The entire programming team quit except for you. It was right after you left the office. You mean Harvey and Lenny both quit at the same time? Apparently, they both got hired by some startup on the East Coast. Can you believe that Harvey complained about the working conditions and mandatory unpaid overtime? Those ungrateful traitors. Don't worry, though. We'll just hire some fresh meat right out of college. But until that happens, you'll need to work weekends. But you said I could have this weekend off. We talked about this. Listen, sweetheart, do you have the first clue how privileged you are to work in the gaming industry? Let me mansplain this to you in a way that you'll understand. 8-hour weeks and unpaid overtime is an expected part of life as a game developer. You've been in the industry for long enough to know this. Maybe if we made games people actually wanted to play, your employees wouldn't mind putting in the extra hours, she said. Besides, if we're behind, it's only because we overcommitted. That'll be enough of your sass, woman. I expect to see you at work tomorrow morning. This game isn't going to write itself, so unless you want to be begging for scraps out of a cardboard box on the sidewalk, I'd better see you in here early tomorrow morning. No sleeping in will be tolerated. Good night. After her boss ended the call, she let out a short string of profanities as she put the phone into her bathrobe single pocket. She had really been looking forward to having a weekend off. Hopefully she could deal with this metaphysical crisis in time to get to work in the morning. She turned her attention to the other object on the kitchen counter. The game cartridge loomed ominously where she'd left it. With no small amount of trepidation, she picked it up and examined it from all angles. It appeared to be no different than any other Super Nintendo game in her library. She brought the game cartridge to her bedroom, fired up her netbook, and pulled up Netscape Navigator. A Google search for Legend of Ethereal brought up no positive results. There were a number of books with that title, but nothing that looked like a video game. Ethereal SNES and Ethereal Game both came up negative as well. Having exhausted her other options, she decided that there was nothing for it but to plug the game in and see what happened. She kept all of her video game stuff that she wasn't using in the closet across from the bathroom. It was the same closet where normal people kept towels, bed sheets, and washcloths. Her Super Nintendo was stashed in there somewhere. She finally found it sandwiched neatly between her ColecoVision and OUYA. Out of the corner of her eye, she spied the clock. It was now 99:12, and still ticking backward. Clearly she was on a time limit. Whatever it was that she was expected to do, she had better get on with it. She carried the game system back to the living room and set it on the coffee table between the plasma TV and her cushy sofa. Fortunately, her TV was old enough to still have the composite video inputs needed to use the system. She threw herself onto the couch and searched through the cushions until she finally uncovered the remote control. After the TV finished its 10-second warm-up cycle, she reached over and hit the power switch on the game system. There were none of the company logos or splash screens that normally appeared on these games. Instead, after a moment, she was presented with a highly pixelated vista showing an ocean backdrop, which scrolled by via a Mode 7 effect. Epic-sounding game music played, setting the tone. The view settled and panned upward to reveal clouds that surrounded the game title, Legend of Ethereal. An animated serpent coiled itself around some of the letters. The Mode 7 effects weren't bad, and the music was nice, but so far it didn't seem much different from the multitude of other games of that era. Certainly nothing that would explain the situation. Two options appeared at the bottom of the screen, New Game and Continue. The word Continue was grayed out. She pressed the A key, but nothing happened. Apparently this was one of those games which used the B key to select and A to cancel. She pressed B, and the screen faded to black. The words Enter Your Name appeared at the top of the otherwise black screen. Using the controller's directional pad, she entered the name Tasha, taking care to use lowercase letters where appropriate. She liked to imagine herself as the protagonist, so she used her own name when video games gave her the option. With luck, the protagonist would be female or gender neutral, otherwise the name wouldn't make much sense. Having entered her name, she selected Confirm and pressed the B key. The moment her finger depressed the controller's button, she was overcome by a rush of dizziness and vertigo. Her vision faded, and everything around her was shrouded in blackness. Her body was stuck in a standing pose and resisted any attempt at movement. She tried to inhale, but the air was thin, and it was difficult to breathe. She thought she could hear tense music playing. Was someone there? Help! Someone! Anyone! She called out, but her voice sounded muffled. Her body seemed to be encased in something. There was pressure pushing against her arms, legs, and chest, holding her in place. A well of panic rose up as she realized that she was facing the very real danger of dying. She had to get out. She needed air. She struggled to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. After leaning forward, she felt a momentary sense of motion. She leaned forward again and felt the same sensation of motion. She began to rock back and forth, pushing her weight against whatever was holding her. Her center of gravity abruptly shifted to her abdomen as she fell forward. For a moment she seemed to be falling, but that moment came to a sudden halt as she hit the ground. There was a jarring sensation of pain at whatever had been confining her, shattering into fragments. At least she could breathe again. She took in several desperate gasps of air, but then erupted into a coughing fit, having inhaled dust. Rubbing the dust out of her eyes, Tasha looked around and tried to ascertain her situation. It seemed that she was lying prone on the ground in a dimly lit room. Clay fragments lay scattered around her body. It was too dim to see them properly, but they were pieces of what had been confining her. Slowly, she removed the last of the clay pieces that covered her and got to her feet. She was in a large chamber and was surrounded by walls lined with intricate carved designs and murals. Along the walls were tall pedestals that displayed statues of different people. There were dozens of men, women, and children. 6 of the pedestals were empty and had fragments at their base. One of them was the pedestal that she had fallen from. Had she been inside one of the statues? That would explain why she couldn't breathe and was now surrounded by clay fragments. She could still hear the music, but couldn't place a source for it. The melody was coming from all around her. The music was less intense and more atmospheric now. It didn't seem to be coming from any external source. It actually sounded like the music was playing inside of her head. There were several dimly glowing objects that she hadn't noticed before. They floated in her view and looked suspiciously like a heads-up display from a video game. There was a compass floating at the bottom of her field of view, and 3 red hearts at the top. One of the hearts was empty, and the one in the middle was only half full. There were several other status bars that she didn't recognize right away. Her heads-up display aligned with her torso rather than her head. As she turned her body, it remained right in front of her. She found that she could turn her head without it getting in the way. Although there wasn't any visible surface, it seemed as though the HUD was projected onto a curved screen that centered around her. Finally, there was an animated green arrow growing upward right in front of her on the inside of the HUD. After she swiped her finger upward along the green arrow, the arrow vanished. A floating blue curved rectangular screen appeared in its place, similar in form to the one that she'd seen at the crossroads earlier that day. On the left side of the screen was a rough stylized portrait. The portrait showed her dark skin and frizzy hair, though the lips seemed a bit off, and Tasha never looked anywhere near that wistful in real life. The words Tasha Singleton, level 1 couch potato, appeared alongside the image of her face. At the bottom right of the screen was a clock. It read 99:03:14, but wasn't ticking downward. Along the right side of the floating screen were options for items, quests, stats, abilities, map, tools, and options. When she reached out and touched the screen, it resisted her touch. It was actually there, and she could interact with it. She tapped on stats, and a second screen appeared. Tasha Singleton, level 1 couch potato. Race, human, player. Subclass, none. Weapon, unarmed, attack 1. Armor, cozy bathrobe, defense, 0.25. Heart containers, 1.5 out of 3. Mana containers, 3 out of 3. Amusement index, 5.1. Strength 2, intelligence 8, agility 2, precision 4, charisma 4, attack 2. Magic attack 7, magic defense 6. There was clearly a menu from an RPG video game. What else could it be? Hey, she complained in no way in particular, what's the big deal giving me agility of 2? At least she had a reasonably highish intelligence score, but her strength and agility were just embarrassing. There was a Super Nintendo controller hovering just below the screen, but she decided to ignore it for the time being. She was only capable of dealing with so much weirdness at a time. She closed the stat page and dismissed the menu by tapping the red X in the corner of each screen. Just as that screen vanished, another appeared in its place. Quest, welcome to Etheria. Class, main quest line, compulsory. Welcome, you've been summoned to Etheria and are trapped in the temple of the player. Find a way to escape. Beware, for monsters lurk in the darkness. Good luck. Conditions for success, find a way out of the temple. Conditions for failure, none. Reward, 50 XP. Well, that settles that. It was now an inescapable truth that Tasha had been sucked into a video game. Just then, the thought occurred to her that she may well have gone mad. Considering the events of the past few hours, that did seem to be a reasonable hypothesis. Well, if I have gone mad, the very least I can do is take my madness seriously and find a way out of here. The walls were covered in a faintly glowing, bioluminescent moss. It wasn't enough to fully light the vast hall, but at least it offered some indication of the room's boundaries. The statues formed a wide semicircle, and there was a large door at the far end of the room. Tasha began walking towards the door, but only made it a few paces before tripping over a step that she hadn't seen in the darkness. Breaking the fall with her hands opened up some additional scratches. She got to her feet and pulled out her cell phone from her bathrobe pocket. Fortunately, it appeared to have made the journey with her and was undamaged. Like most city dwellers, Tasha was lost and confused without her phone. The screen said that it still had 69% of its remaining battery life, so hopefully it would last long enough for her to find a way out. The time on the front read 99:03:12. but it was no longer ticking downward, as it had been doing back in her apartment. She watched it for a moment longer to make sure, but the time didn't change. Hadn't it been higher before? She flipped on the phone's flashlight app and had a proper look at her surroundings. She was in a vast circular chamber. There were several flights of stairs from where the statues were arranged. As she approached the great door at the far end of the chamber, she began to question her earlier assumption that it was a door. Doors tended to have keys or knobs or some other mechanism to open them. The only thing that distinguished this door from the wall was a slightly darker shade of stone. Circling the room, she came upon a raised platform along one side of the door. Curious, she stepped onto it and heard a loud grinding noise, followed by a short musical tune. A horizontal sliver of light appeared from the base of the doorway as it lifted up. A few seconds passed, and the entire door opened, revealing a hint of the chamber beyond. Grinning, she took a single step toward the door. The movement of her foot left the pressure plates, the enormous stone door slamming against the ground with a loud bang. Huh. Tasha had solved this exact puzzle dozens of times in video games. Clearly, she just needed to put a heavy object on the plate to hold it down while she passed through the door. She searched the room for something that she could use to hold down the plate. For the briefest of moments, she considered using the stone debris from her statue. The clay fragments barely weighed anything, and most likely wouldn't do the job. She discovered some ornamental spears on display against one of the walls. She examined one, and a small blue box appeared just above it with the item's details. Low-quality blunt spear. Class, weapon, spear. A basic pull with a pointy bit at the end. Damage 0.75. Durability 10. Snatching one of the spears, she gave it a practice thrust into the empty room. In the bottom corner of her provision, a message faded in. Ability unlocked. Spear weapon proficiency, level 0. Type, passive weapon proficiency. Represents your experience using spear-based weapons. When using spears, accuracy is increased by 1% and damage is increased by 0.5%. Although her spearmanship clearly left much to be desired, she still felt more comfortable holding a weapon in her hands. The bit in the earlier quest notification about monsters lurking in the dark concerned her. Spear in one hand, phone in the other, Tasha slowly made her way to the far side of the chamber to the left of the door. There she found what she was looking for, a large metal box with handles built into each side. It was slightly larger than she was tall. The handholds clearly implied that the box was meant to be pushed or pulled. She returned her phone to her pocket and moved to the other side of the box. After putting her weight against it, the massive box only budged a few inches. She took a step back and threw herself against the box. The box only slid another foot, and Tasha's shoulder felt the pain from the impact. How does Link make this look so easy? Guess my strength score might be deserved after all. It would take hours to move the box to the plate at this rate. She tried pulling the box, but that ended up being even less effective than pushing it. She made an effort to lift up the box to turn it over onto its side, but all that earned her was a sore back. I'm not using my head. There's got to be some other way to move this besides brute force. It was time to put her intelligence of 8 to work. Maybe she could use the spear as a lever to lift it. Unfortunately, there was nothing around that she could use as a fulcrum. Instead, she removed the spearhead from the pole. After some experimentation, she discovered that it could be separated by detaching the rivet that bound the spearhead to the shaft. After repeating this process for the other spears, she laid them down in a series in front of the metal box. Finally, she lodged one of them underneath the box. This required a small amount of elbow grease, but she made it happen. Moving to the far end of the crate, she pushed with all of her might. The box moved slowly at first, but rapidly picked up speed as it moved onto the pole and transferred its weight to the next one. In this manner, Tasha was able to move the large metal box to the pressure plate. After she pushed the crate the final few inches, it pressed down against the plate, causing the door to side open. She reattached one of the spearheads to one of the poles so that she wouldn't have to face the next room unarmed. Spear in hand, she approached the doorway and entered the next room. It's a divinity puzzle, but yeah, that's like a puzzle in a lot of games too. Chapter 4, Resurrection. Tasha found herself in a wide hall with a closed door at the far end of the room. Weapons of all kinds lined the walls, each upon their own pedestal. Floating in the center of the room was a faintly glowing glass sphere. Another quest dialogue appeared before her as she entered the room. Quest, violence is always the answer. Class, subquest, compulsory. It is dangerous to go alone. Take one of these with you. Conditions for success. Select a weapon and find a way to the next room. Conditions for failure, none. Reward, 5 XP, one weapon of your choice. Dismissing the quest message, Tasha approached the strange floating orb. The sphere resisted her attempts to move it. It wasn't being suspended by any cords or other mechanism. It was simply floating in place. Tasha had witnessed dozens of impossible things in the last few hours, so she wasn't as freaked out by the glowing sphere as she otherwise would have been. Experimenting, she put her weight against it, and it moved ever so slightly. As it moved away from its original position, she noticed that the glow darkened just a bit. When she let go, it moved back, regaining its previous glow. This must be another puzzle. She reasoned that if the orb was hit with enough force, it could trigger the door to open. Sure, she was using video game logic, but it felt appropriate. She would choose one of the weapons lining the walls and hit the orb with as much of an impact as she could. One by one, she had inspected each of the weapons. Each time she examined a weapon, a small translucent dialogue appeared, listing the weapon's name and stats. In a group along one wall were throwing axes, battle axes, and hatchets. A short distance off were several varieties of bows, crossbows, and slingshots. They were tempting, but Tasha didn't see herself as a projectile weapon user. There was a small selection of firearms as well. If there are guns in this world, why would anyone use a sword or a bow? The answer became apparent when she read the description for one of the rifles. Cheap imitation boomstick. Class, weapon, firearm. A low-quality Zakharan-made firearm with low damage and poor aim. This is a cheap imitation of the higher-quality Dwarven-made boomstick of the same name. Requires ammunition, which can either be crafted or purchased from NPC merchants. Damage 1.5, aim -2, cooldown 2 seconds, durability 190. The damage stat was only slightly higher than other weapons, and the cooldown and accuracy was low. On top of that, she would have to worry about ammunition. It was possible that other guns might have better stats, but if she was fighting close range, it would make more sense to use a sword or spear. Tasha passed right by a set of steel knuckle gloves and examined a row of staves and wands. Being able to cast spells was an appealing possibility. She picked up an oaken staff and pointed it at the wall, saying, "Magic missile!" Nothing happened. Maybe there was a way for her to acquire spells. While holding the staff, her magic attack increased from 7 to 9, but without any spells, it was little more than a walking stick. On one table was a set of throwing stars, some nunchucks, an umbrella blade, and 2 metal war fans. She picked up the war fans and examined them. The item stats window said that it was called a Tessin and dealt 1.25 damage. If she chose the metal fan, she could be stylish, fight like a samurai, and be able to cool herself off if it got too hot. After accidentally cutting herself with it twice, she returned the Tessin to the table. In the right hands, it might be an effective weapon, but without the needed martial arts training, she was more likely to injure herself than anyone else. If this was going to be her adventure, she wanted a sword. Swords were cool. She made her way to the section of the wall that held blades of various types and sizes. While it was true that Tasha had a measly 2 strength points and 2 agility points, there was no reason to believe that would always be the case. This was a point that she was firm on. She'd always wanted to fight using a sword. She'd even practiced in her apartment using a wooden practice sword. She even had the busted lava lamp to prove it. There were swords of varying lengths and styles. Tasha picked up a curved, piratey sword that one might reasonably expect Red Guards to use. It was light, and she could swing it easily. It might be a smart choice, but it wasn't speaking to her, so she returned it to its pedestal. Mounted on the wall was an enormous buster sword that was actually taller than she was. She attempted to lift the large metal weapon from its pedestal, and it crashed onto the ground, very narrowly missing her good foot. She tried to pick it back up, but could barely lift it a few inches. There was no way that Tasha could fight effectively using a weapon that she couldn't even lift. Not having any way to return it to its mount, she left the enormous blade on the ground where it had fallen. Just as she was about to try the katana, something else caught her eye. It was a long sword with a mahogany handle that supported a trigger as though it were a gun. Since the handle was designed to resemble a gun, it was completely parallel with the blade. This was it. This was her weapon. It just had to be. Even though she had no idea how gunblades were actually supposed to work in real life, since the weapon had a trigger but no barrel. Beginner gunblade, class weapon, a low-cost gunblade used for training, damage 1, durability 300. There was a small question mark icon next to the weapon's stat, so she tapped it. Gunblades are a specialized form of sword with a trigger handle that allows you to rapidly invoke gun actions. Different spells can be selected by flicking the selector switch with your thumb. Both right and left-handed gunblades are available for purchase. The beginner gunblade is pre-built with the following spell: Firestorm. Spell class, enchantment. Increases damage by 30% and adds fire elements for 0.91 seconds. Cost 0.11 mana. Grasping the gunblade by the handle, she gave it a few practice swings. It had weight to it, but she could swing it around easily enough. The angled handle would take some getting used to, but the weapon just oozed with style. Making her way to the floating sphere, Tasha assumed the familiar sword stance that she'd seen in countless Japanese cartoons that had practiced in front of the mirror when nobody was watching. The gunblade swept through the air and impacted the sphere, hitting it and causing it to darken for a moment. As the sword impacted, 2 hearts floated above the sphere, one of them emptying in response to the damage. The orb darkened slightly, but after a few seconds it returned to its original color as the hearts refilled. Ability unlocked. Gunblade weapon proficiency, level 0. Type passive weapon proficiency. Represents your experience using gunblades. When using gunblades, accuracy is increased by 1% and damage is increased by 0.5%. so apparently a single hit wasn't strong enough to dislodge the orb. She took another look at the weapon's description. It said that if she pulled the trigger, it would deal extra damage, but only for 0.91 seconds. If she timed her downswing, she might be able to get the damage boost with her next attack. Deciding to try it out first, she extended the gun blade and pulled the trigger. Immediately the sword began to vibrate, and then the blade was wreathed in flames. She very nearly dropped the gun blade in surprise. Heat radiated from the fire, but the flames didn't come in contact with her hand. A second later, the vibration ended, and the flames vanished. One of the 2 mana containers on her HUD was ever so slightly reduced. With her 2 mana containers, she should be able to use the ability just under 20 times. Alright, it's time to put this to the test. She raised the sword above her head, pulled the trigger, and slammed the sword onto the sphere. The glass sphere blackened and fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The door at the far end of the hallway opened in response. Before Tasha could advance into the next room, 2 smallish humanoid creatures entered through the now open door. They were short, skinny, mostly bald, greenish men wearing loincloths and carrying large knives with curved blades. She focused on one of them, and a description appeared alongside the creature in her field of view. Boblin A, level 1, floated in the air above the creature, along with 2 heart containers. Tasha glanced at the creature's partner, and similar text and hearts appeared above it. Scan data appeared in a small window in her battle HUD. Boblin, level 1, the weakest monster at the outset of any adventure. Attack 1, magic attack 0, defense 2, magic defense 0. Beside the scan data and at the bottom of her HUD was her combat log. The text was big enough for her to read without having to turn her head. 2 Boblins appear. Combat started. Boblin A fingers his sword menacingly. Boblin B attacks Tasha. So, here we go. Here is the first shot of the night. I'm going to do this thing because it is tequila and it helps if I open this. And it is gross if you don't do salt and lime with it. So, let's try it this way. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I will reload that when I get to the next attack. The moment she read this text, one of the creatures rushed at her. Before she could react, the creature plunged its cold metal dagger into her midsection. As the metal blade met flesh, it sank into her belly. She could hear the sound of her muscles and tendons being ripped apart by the foreign object. For several seconds, the creature held the knife there before pulling it out and backing away. So that actually counts as the same attack. The gun blade fell from Tasha's hand and hit the stone floor at her side. For just a moment, she didn't fully comprehend what had happened, but then waves of burning pain overwhelmed her senses. Tasha had never experienced this level of raw pain before. The sound of her screams of pain and agony filled the air. Her hand instinctively went to the wound in her belly, and she came away dripping with a wet, sticky substance. She looked down at them and saw that her hands were coated in blood. Tasha wanted to say something, to beg for mercy, but her mouth was already filled with blood. Her vision began to blur. She could barely make out the second grinning creatures that slashed her throat open with a single crosswise cut. She collapsed to the floor, her life essence draining away. Tasha tried to breathe, but was unable to draw in air. Her awareness of the world around her diminished, and seconds later was gone. Alright, so that was the second attack. So, going for round 2, immediately after round 1. I'm almost out of Cuervo, but if I do run out, I don't even think that's going to be a whole shot. But if I do run out, I have Parrot Bay here too, so I will keep on going. There is a scene break, by the way, and while I'm doing this, I need to say that the art on this book, this cover, is really phenomenal. He has an amazing cover artist. The costumes are super detailed. The monster is super detailed. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, let's go again. Yeah, that wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Alright. Tasha's body had died, but she was still aware and fully conscious. She had no eyes to see with, and everything was black as pitch. Panic flooded her mind as she tried to breathe but found that she could no longer do so. Her mouth and lungs were both gone, but the impulse to draw in air was no less urgent. Yeah. I don't know what that was. Anyway. Am I dead? She wondered. That asshole creature must have killed me. What the hell kind of afterlife is this? For a long while, she was overcome by the constant need to breathe. She had the urge to scream, but couldn't. Tears would have been welling up in her eyes had she the tear ducts to produce them. Desperation and a sense of terror overwhelmed her. Tasha began to fear that she would never experience anything again, that she would just linger in a world of senseless nothingness. It took time. It might have been minutes or hours, but eventually she became accustomed to not being able to breathe. There was no discomfort, no active sensation at all, no hunger, no thirst, and no pain. Her discomfort gradually diminished. She distracted herself by focusing on her memories, time she spent with her father growing up. She remembered how angry she was with her mother after the divorce. She'd barely spoken with her since then, even after her father's funeral. In this place of death, Tasha wished that she had been more forgiving. She thought about her job. She was going to be late for work, permanently. She'd never really done anything useful with her life. She had never worked on a video game that she could be proud of. Not really. She didn't have any close friends or family or to remember her. She would die unaccomplished and unremembered. It was too late to do anything about any of that now, since she had died, and this was surely hell. It wasn't like any sort of hell that she'd read about in Dante's Inferno, but the thought of spending an eternity without sensory input was just as terrifying. It was easy to lose track of time in that place devoid of dimension. Tasha had no idea how long she had lingered here. As the procession of moments went by, they blended together, and her awareness of the passage of time became less defined. For a long while, nothing happened. Nothing at all. Then, despite not having any ears to listen with, Tasha heard something. It was a voice in the darkness, calling out her name as though from a great distance. Tasha. Then she heard it again, this time louder, more distinct, and with her own voice. She could sort of see something now. It was an unclothed woman with her own body looking back at her. Tasha. The woman in front of her said her name a third time, her lips matching up to the sounds. She was so close. Tasha felt like she could reach out and touch her. Her eyes snapped open and she drew in a deep breath. Tasha was alive and had a body again. She could feel sensation once more. She could feel the air against her bare legs and arms and the coarse feeling of stone beneath her bare feet. The sound of her own breath filled her ears, and for a moment she reveled in the simple joy of filling her lungs with air. Tasha was standing on a stone platform in a dimly lit room. Her legs were like wobbly noodles as she stepped down off the platform and onto the main floor. She was barefoot and clothed only in a plain sleeveless white shirt and a simple pair of short cloth pants. A message hovered in the air in front of her. You have died and respawned. Time elapsed in oblivion 1 hour 9 minutes. You have lost 5% of your level progress, bringing you to 0 XP. She dismissed the message by tapping it away. Respawn, as in being reborn after death in a video game? Tasha felt different. It wasn't clear how, but she didn't feel the same as before. It was as though she'd changed somehow, that she wasn't the same person anymore. Taking in her surroundings, Tasha quickly realized that she was in the same starting room that she had appeared in earlier. At her feet, clay fragments littered the ground. The large metal box was where she had left it, on the pressure plate. Light shone through the large door at the far end of the room. It was the room with all the weapons where that thing had killed her. A rush of anger overcame her. Anger at herself for dying so easily. Without pausing to think about what she was doing, Tasha headed toward the door. Picking up one of the spears, she peered into the room and saw the two creatures wandering about in repeating patterns. They hadn't noticed her. She waited patiently until they both had their backs to the door. The moment the boblins' backs were turned, Tasha ran into the room and thrust the spear, impaling one of the creatures in the back. Two boblins appear. Combat started. Backstab. Critical hit. Tasha deals 2 damage to Boblin B. Boblin B dies. The boblin let out a scream of pain and vanished. Its body dissolved into a purple cloud of particulate vapor that dispersed into the room. The spear that impelled the creature was covered in blood. The second boblin rushed to attack her, but Tasha extended her spear in an attempt to keep it at bay. Her attacker tried to move past her spear, but was unable to dodge past her defense, so it returned to its earlier position. Tasha quickly scanned the room. The gunblade was lying on the ground next to her corpse, which still lay unmoving. Her corpse's dead, unblinking, unseeing eyes locked on the ceiling above. Alright, so I'm actually going to take a look at what I said for the rules of this, if it was an attack or if they actually landed a hit. Every time the character takes damage. Okay. Let's see. No time to get all weirded out and introspective now, Tasha. There are monsters to kill. She reached down with her free hand and picked up the gunblade from where it lay on the stone tile, dropping the spear. With no small amount of trepidation, she approached the boblin and splashed at it in a downward motion, and the blade opened a diagonal cut into its skin. The boblin didn't even try to dodge her attack. Tasha deals 1 damage to Boblin A. I don't know why I can't say damage. The creature lunged at her in response, but she backpedaled, losing her balance and falling backward to the floor, causing her to land right beside the corpse. The boblin rushed her, so she stabbed toward it. The creature's own momentum drove it right into her blade. She pushed the gunblade's trigger, causing the blade to vibrate and ignite, tearing the boblin apart from the inside. Tasha deals 1.5 damage to Boblin A. The creature's body vanished, fading into the same purple haze as its companion, and rapidly dissipated into the surrounding air. Victory! All enemies have been vanquished, plus 10 experience gained, 90 to next level, 6 GP found. Boblin blood coated her white shirt with splotches of red. As a wave of nausea set in, she started to retch, but since her new body had never eaten anything, she had nothing to throw up. Getting to her feet, she backed away from the woman's body in the center of the room. It was her body, still dressed in the bathrobe and blood-stained PJs. There was a smattering of blood pooled on the ground, and her pajama top was soaked red. Upon seeing the wound in the corpse's belly, Tasha's hand went to her own belly sympathetically, but Tasha had no such wound. Her skin was smooth and without any injury. The air was frigid, causing her teeth to chatter. The simple cloth garment that she had respawned with provided no real protection from the cold. She gazed at her corpse's bathrobe longingly. It looked warm and inviting. She found herself actually considering looting her own body. She couldn't quite believe what she'd done to those boblins. Knowing herself, after respawning, she should have curled up into a fetal position. Instead, the first thing she'd done after coming back to life was to kill 2 creatures. Now she thought about killing more boblins and was excited by the idea. The old Tasha hated violence of any kind. She wouldn't harm a fly. She literally captured flies in bottles and set them free outside. That's how much of a pacifist Tasha used to be. How had she changed so much in such a short period of time? Gathering her determination, she moved to her former body and carefully removed the cell phone from her bathrobe pocket. She then drew out her arms from the bathrobe. The body was limp and didn't resist movement. The body was still warm to the touch. Ignoring the unfortunate smell as best as she could, Tasha removed the bathrobe and dragged the body to the corner of the room. She wished she could bury it, but that didn't seem practical in her current situation. It seemed somehow appropriate to offer a short prayer over her corpse, just in case. Tasha opened her menu by swiping up and accessed the inventory page. She pulled out her phone and touched the button to store it away. Her phone was currently the only object in her inventory list. She wanted to explore the menu system and learn more about the world that she had been transported to. Right at that moment, however, Tasha was more interested in finding mobs to kill. Chapter 5, The Pugilist and the Thief. 2 travelers stood upon a hill overlooking the valley. The man and his adopted daughter had spent the last 2 months trying to reach this place. The latitude and longitude they had been given matched up. They had made it without a moment to spare. The girl wore a tunic, trousers, and a brown cloak that partially hid her brown hair. She was short, and her frame was almost painfully thin. She couldn't afford a true invisibility cloak, but her cloak was enchanted with an unnoticeability enchantment, which was nearly as good. Monsters were less likely to target her, and people's eyes naturally slid off her as though she wasn't there when the ability was in effect. She adjusted her glasses and tapped at a translucent glass-like panel, which hovered before her in the air. To anyone who might have seen her, it would appear as if she was just tapping at the air. Menu screens were only ever visible to their users. After a few taps, a spyglass materialized out of thin air and into her hand. She dismissed the menu with a gesture and regarded the spyglass. Her name, Pan, was etched into the spyglass using stylized lettering. It was both elegant and functional, designed to allow the user to see long distances. It was spelled to increase magnification. It was spelled to increase magnification, but doing so cost the user mana points, and Pan needed to conserve the small amount she had left. Even without using mana, the spyglass was a useful tool. Her father had given it to her for her 15th birthday at a few months past. In only 2 years' time, she would be considered a full-fledged adult. This concerned her for a moment, but she put her worries out of her mind. She needed to remain alert. They were traveling through the wilderness, far from the safety of civilization and the protection offered by well-traveled roads. Her hands were trembling, but she steadied them as she brought the spyglass to her eye. Peering through the spyglass at the valley below, she could discern the outline of an ancient structure. She pulled up the map screen from her menu, and the familiar translucent pane of ethereal glass revealed the area map. Her map could only show places where she had already visited and was expanding as she traveled. She had plotted the longitude and latitude coordinates into her map, and a navigation point appeared at their destination. "Ari," she said, pointing. She handed the spyglass to the man, and he took it from her trembling hands. "Don't call me Ari," the man said. "It's Dad. Remember, you're supposed to call me Dad." Ari was several feet taller than Pan, and was wearing a heavily worn set of travel garments. His tattered cloak was in desperate need of either repair or replacement, but he had made it a rule to avoid towns and the services they provided. As long as Pan wore her hood up and Ari wore his hat, onlookers from a distance might mistake them for elves. Advertising their status as UN refugees would be an invitation for trouble. Since setting out, they had been assaulted twice by angry natives. The war with the humans was still too fresh in Elven memory, and the law was liable to turn a blind eye whenever humans were the victims. Fortunately, they had nearly reached the end point of their journey. He took the spyglass from her and inspected the distant structure. There was evidence of some of the ruins of an ancient city. Dozens of stone columns stood like sentinels on the grassy field. The columns were the only complete thing. So much of the structure had crumbled to dust, ravaged by the ages. Some of the stone columns were partially collapsed, but a few held their vertical form. A maze of dilapidated walls indicated where buildings used to be. I can see a structure, Ari said. I think the area with the pillars might have been a castle, or maybe a temple. What do you think? Should we head there first? Pan waited for a moment and offered a shallow nod. Good, he said, returning Pan's spyglass to her. If things go well, we should be able to reach our destination before nightfall. Let's get moving. They descended the hill towards the structure. Ari took up the lead, and his daughter trailed several paces behind. After traveling for about 20 minutes, a notification appeared in Ari's log. Entering new zone, Temple Ruin, northern outskirts. Recommended level 12 to 15. They both came to an abrupt stop. This could be problematic. Ari was a level 11 monk, and Pan was a level 6 thief. If multiple level 15 mobs appeared, it would be trouble. Level wasn't everything, of course. High-level equipment could bridge the level gap, but neither of them were burdened with an overabundance of good gear. Mobs weren't truly sentient, and that was their main weakness. If you learned their attack patterns, it wasn't impossible for a low-level adventurer to defeat a much higher-level monster. Things became more complicated when fighting multiple opponents, however. Go around? Said Pan, drawing a circle with her hands. Ari shook his head. We could try to circumnavigate the zone, but we don't know its shape or extent. Mapping it would take time, and according to Libra's prophecy, we need to be there by tonight. He pulled out the small slip of paper that he had received from the Libra, the Eidolon of Prophecy. The text written on it said, to find a cure, travel to longitude 33.285947, latitude -96.572767 by sundown on February 29th. There was still plenty of time to make it by nightfall, but only if they traveled in a straight line. If they were killed, they would respawn at their last save point nearly 100 miles to the east. Death in Ethereal was not permanent, but resurrection came at a cost. The person who died would lose 5% of their level progress. Whatever equipment they didn't have in their inventory would remain with their corpses, and they would lose any distance they had traveled since saving. There were also less tangible costs to resurrection. While a person's spirit and memory survived the transition from one body to another, something ineffable was lost. The new body was not simply a copy of the old one, but an approximation. There were always differences between the old body and the new one, including significant deviations in the brain's makeup. Those differences led to changes of personality. When someone resurrected, their memories survived, but their personality was lost forever. Pan had died 3 times in her short life, and although her autism had survived each of her rebirths, something was lost each time it happened. Her tastes, preferences, and behavior changed radically every time she died. She didn't feel that she loved as deeply now as she had in her first life, and often thought about that version of herself. The XP loss was painful and could mean days or weeks of lost experience grinding, but that wasn't the main reason that people avoided death. It was the loss of self that people feared the most. I don't think we have a choice, said Ari. We'll have to cut straight through. If we get attacked, we'll run farther than fighting. Otherwise, just be careful and try not to draw aggro. We can't afford to take any risks. It wasn't in Ari's nature to run from a fight, but experience had taught him to be pragmatic. Now he had someone he cared about to protect. This quest was important to them both. Descending the hill, they continued their journey toward the temple ruins. Just under an hour later, a purple mist-like cloud began to form around them. Occasionally specks of light emerged and drifted to and fro on the wind before flickering out. The misty substance that surrounded them was known as Ethereal Mist. The fact that they could see it was the telltale indicator that they were about to face a random encounter. Time to shut up, Ari said, tapping at a quick slot on his HUD. His travel clothing was replaced by a white martial artist GI that partially boosted his defense and speed-derived stats. As a pugilist, he fought unarmed and didn't use weapons. Some pugilists used brass knuckles or claws, but use of those weapons would have precluded the use of certain abilities. Also, they cost money, which was in short supply. Pan tapped at her HUD interface, and the crossbow materialized in her right hand. Her weapon materialized in her outstretched hand. Her travel clothing was replaced by a set of studded leather armor. It simply wasn't practical to travel while wearing leather armor due to the oppressive summer heat, so she only equipped the armor when she expected to be in combat. She had her combat equipment set to a quick slot on her HUD so she could change between traveling clothing and combat attire in a matter of seconds. A pouch of bolts appeared on her belt. Her choice of the crossbow made sense given her weak strength stat, but she dearly wished she could switch to firearms. Unfortunately, quality dwarf-made guns were expensive, and the cheaper Zacharan and elven-made imitations weren't worth it. The crossbow was a reasonable compromise. She had experimented using a classic compound bow, but she lacked the upper body strength needed to fire it with sufficient force. I can actually sympathize with that. Anyway, continuing. The amount of damage that a bow dealt was derived from the user's strength, and she would never be strong. She considered the crossbow a more elegant weapon, as it improved her aim significantly. Of course, the drawback to the crossbow was its reload time. Reloading a crossbow took several times longer than a regular bow. She used the wooden cocking lever to arm the crossbow. Her hands were shaking, so she closed her eyes and counted backwards from 10. When she opened them, her hands were steady. Just a little further, she was almost there. Alright guys, again this was Couch Potato Chaos Gamebound by Erik Rounds. I'm actually going to finish reading the rest of this. He was like so sweet to send me this paperback, and I am telling you, if you really need to look at this art, because this is some gorgeous cover art. Because I have like there's like not even a shot left in here, I'm just going to go ahead and take it just for the hell of taking it, and to get rid of this bottle. So, bonus shot for no reason. Yeah, see, it's not even a shot, it's like a half shot. But yeah, it's an entertaining read. It's kind of, there's definitely a lot of throwbacks to games if you've played a lot of like old school games. It's dangerous to go alone, take this. There's definitely some Zelda references. It's very cute. So I'm kind of excited to read the rest of it. So let me go ahead and do this. Alright guys, that was it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, I hope you have a good day, a good night, a good week, a good weekend, whatever time it is that when you're watching this, and I will see you in the next show.